Our culture's obsession with vintage objects has rendered us unable to separate history from nostalgia. People want heart. They want a chaser of emotion with their aesthetics. Our brains are like bonsai trees, growing around our private versions of reality. I'm a summer baby, so I usually have my birthday as a good summer memory. Because I am a horrible flincher, contact lenses are not an option. I'm always envious of contact wearers. There are endless reasons to take off one's glasses during the day and, as I have grown older, what I don't see has become increasingly pronounced. I used to think that nails-down-a-chalkboard was the worst sound in the world. Then I moved on to people eating cereal on the phone. But only this week did I stumble across the rightful winner. It's the sound of a baggage carousel coming to a grinding halt, having reunited every passenger on your flight with their luggage, except for you. I was diagnosed with a severe temporal spatial deficit, a learning disability that means I have zero spatial relations skills. It was official, I was a genius trapped in an idiot's body. Brits and Americans have hundreds of different phrases for the same thing. Luckily, it's usually a source of amusement rather than frustration. A flashlight by any other name is still a torch. My personal favorite is fairy lights, which we boringly refer to as Christmas lights. I don't really think of my essays as being about myself. I know it sounds insane, but I just don't think of them as a memoir. They're essays, they're not an autobiography. Are there moments when I see unrequited crushes or ex-boyfriends slow dancing with their dates and kind of want to stab myself in the spleen with a salad fork? Yeah, sure. I was the youngest of my entire family, so you are tap dancing to try to get the attention of your older cousins. I really hit my social stride in 6th grade. But before that I was a pretty big dork. You learn how to be amusing and how to work for it. For the average person, taken to their sick bed, it takes a serious bout of pneumonia or a full body cast to completely forget the life they had prior to falling off the roller coaster. I, however, will do this over a paper cut on my thumb, obsessing of said cut and being generally consumed by it. They say it's not the snoring itself but those anxiety-packed moments in between snorts. It's the waiting for the nasal passages of the person lying beside you to strike again. And strike it always does. In the dark, almost against your will, you produce that special glare reserved for people who cannot control their own behavior. I now know my right from my left and my up from my down. Unluckily, my terrible sense of direction remains. For me, to live in New York City is to never be able to meet someone on the northeast corner. It is to never ever make a smooth entrance, always to get caught looking lost on the street. I love to bake, so I made vanilla bean and blueberry muffins for sick hospital children. Just kidding. All of that is true except the sick children part. The reason that war is such a fascinating subject for writers is because it's a revealer. Put a bunch of people in an adrenaline-fueled, life-or-death situation and their fundamental behaviors are exposed, the scrim is taken away and the motivations behind each personality come out to play. Unless you are a professional, you will find the tart to be a high-maintenance, unforgiving whistleblower of a pastry. Everyone has been in a social situation where you say something and it goes unnoticed, then someone else says the same thing and everyone laughs a lot. You learn how to be more creative and wacky and amusing. For a long time I wanted to draw, but I could never get the proportions right. My still life sketches were the artistic equivalent of someone who has misjudged the space constraints of a postcard, the handwriting shrinking uncomfortably at the bottom. I use Ole Henriksen eye gel when I think of it, and go for facials when spa gift certificates appear as a professional thank you or in a gift bag. Once ensconced in a facialist's chair, I let myself be coaxed into all sorts of treatments, because I'm there already, so why not? When I was 9 years old, I wrote a short story called How to Build a Snowman, from which no practical snowperson crafting techniques could be gleaned. The story was an assignment for class and it featured a series of careful but meaningless instructions. Of course, the building of the snowman was a red herring. The year most of my high school friends and I got our driver's permits, the coolest thing one could do was stand outside after school and twirl one's car keys like a lifeguard whistle. That jingling sound meant freedom and power. I like to try to do a little work before I do anything in the morning, even if it's a paragraph. The trick to scrambled eggs is to remove half the milk from the container and shake what's left as hard as you can, like a cocktail shaker, before you whisk it into the eggs. You know what they say, why sit at a table that doesn't have key lime pie on it if you don't have to? I don't do emoticons unless I'm making a big deal out of them. I'll type out, "This is so amusing it makes me want to grin in pixels," and then do it. Out of all artists, authors are the least trained for the spotlight. Wanting attention isn't a requisite part of the package. I have definitely had experiences where I can feel the shift from simply living my life to being slightly outside of my life and taking notes. For me, titles are either a natural 2-second experience or stressful enough to give you an ulcer. If they don't pop out perfect on the first try, they can be really hard to repair. Or, worse, if the author thinks they pop out perfect, but the publishing house does not agree, it's difficult to shift gears. And then you go insane. In every woman's wardrobe, there are certain accessories that cannot be separated from their backstories. Every day of my adult life, I have worn at least one piece of jewelry from my maternal grandmother's collection, all of which were manufactured by famed Danish silversmith Georg Jensen. To the naked eye, I am either a Jensen loyalist or a grandmother loyalist. Really, I am just a pretty things loyalist. My grandmother was a kind of Scarsdale, New York, society woman, best known in her day as the author of the 1959 book, Growing Your Own Way, an informal guide for teenagers, this despite being a person whose parenting style made Joan Crawford's wire hangers look like pool noodles. The queen of crafts herself, Martha Stewart, and I have the same birthday. I prefer to think it's the glue gun wielding, perfect tart producing Martha and not the copper pan throwing, jail going Martha. But I suppose if I am going to share a calendar square with some of Martha, I have to share it with all of Martha. Personal technology has given us the freedom of being able to do whatever we want, and in the case of celebrities and athletes, whomever they want. But it can also serve as a humiliation jetpack. Alaska is what happens when Willy Wonka and the witch from Hansel and Gretel elope, buy a place together upstate, renounce their sweet teeth, and turn into health fanatics. When you spin a globe and point to a city and actually go to that city, you build an allowance of missed opportunities on the back end. Sometimes in New York, you're walking down the street and you realize there's a girl walking in front of you whose thighs you could hit a golf ball through, and maybe that makes you depressed. Everything in New York seems to merit preserving. If it's not historical, it's personal. If it's not personal, it's cultural. But you can't. You can't save everything. You just have to pack it up in your brain and take it with you when you go. You can't possibly fathom the ins and outs of a prepubescent beauty treatment until you've felt the strange but exhilarating tingle of a cottage cheese and Pop Rocks facial. There's already a marriage clock, a career clock, a biological clock. Sometimes being a woman feels like standing in the lobby of a hotel, looking at the dials depicting every time zone in the world behind the front desk, except they all apply to you, and all at once. There is no such thing as a crazy dog person in New York. Are there people who are completely insane about their dogs? Hordes. But cat people may as well have whiskers and tails themselves. That's because their pets' lack of social need taps straight into our worst fears as the human inhabitants of New York. Cats and their owners are on a private, exclusive loop of affection. Thus cats have become symbolic of a community eschewed and a hyper-engagement with oneself. They represent the profound danger of growing so independent in New York that it's not merely that you don't need anyone, it's that you don't know how to need anyone. A pet store is a celebration of dogs' existence and an explosion of options. About cats, a pet store seems to say, "Here, we couldn't think of anything else." Cats are the Hanukkah of the animal world in this way. They are fated quietly and happily by a minority, but there's only so much hoopla applicable to them. I write on weekends, on vacation, and, really, on deadline and on my floor. Both terrible for the back. There's an everything must go, emotional liquidation feel to the end of your 20s, isn't there? What will happen if we turn 30 and we're not ready? You don't feel entirely settled in any aspect of your life, even if you are on paper. I do think New York prepares you for the cross-section of personalities and realities on display when you leave the country, and I'd live somewhere else if I had a reason or burning to the point of discomfort desire to do so. I think a lot of humor is about distracting yourself. Pretend you're not trying to make it funny, because for some reason the effort to be funny smells like sulfur in our culture. I love giving people advice on what to do with their books, but I don't really know how a Kindle single gets covered. My personality, when tasked with creating meals, goes something like this: is there a way we can make this more difficult? Because let's do that. I don't mean to complicate things. It's just, Why buy pre-packaged potato salad when you can spend your morning boiling potatoes and flipping out because there's no dill in the house? For me, nothing brings out my born yesterday, idiotic qualities quite like having my photograph taken. Like most citizens of popular and international urban centers, I don't take advantage of the cultural opportunities. Perhaps this comes from growing up in suburbia. Home is where you eat, sleep, read, watch television and ignore your parents. It is not where you go to the ballet and then attend a heated panel discussion about it afterwards. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.